Hello everyone, Storm11 here. Today we'll be taking a look into my first spring 2021 and also my severe weather season forecast as well. We'll be taking a look into some modeling. We're also going to take a look to some analogs. We'll also take a look to the climate predictors forecast. And we'll also take a look to my forecast as well. We got a lot to talk about. So let's go ahead and get started with the Cfs model here. And this is on a 3-month average, so March, April, and May. And you can see here, looks like we could potentially see some ridging really across the south here, but you also notice some troughing possibly into the northern plains, which could lead to potential for some severe weather across portions across some of the United States here. Pretty much generally, maybe in this region here, may have the chance for severe weather just by looking at the 500 millibar geopotential height anomalies. If we compare that to the CFS model, it's actually quite different. The difference here is that you got a strong southeast ridge, which I think that's going to be overdone. But troughing is also a little bit further to the west as well. It's actually a little bit more focused across the northwestern United States. Now, I think early on, I think the southeast ridge, at least but the CFS prediction, like in March, the southeast ridge is expected to be a little bit weaker and not as far northwest here. But your trough looks to be stronger as well, also going to be a little bit further to the southeast, which could lead to a big time severe weather threat somewhere in this zone right in here. Could see some big time severe weather. Now, of course, there's going to be some other factors to there as well, which we'll take a look at in just a moment. But let's also kind of take a look into some of the similarities with both of these models. What's a similar I see? Well, let's take a look at here. Ridge right up here, kind of in the Gulf of Alaska. Same way with this one here with the Kansas model. Both of them do show some ridging across the Gulf of Alaska. What does this lead to? Well, I'll tell you what. With the analogs that show something like this, it does show some active severe weather potential here. With ridging across really just closer to the Gulf of Alaska, pretty much into some of the islands of Alaska as well. Could experience ridging here. And what's also similar here, you got troughing across western Canada here. Same with this one here. It's a little bit further west here between the two. We also notice here there is some ridging potentially across the AO region, possibly the NAO region, with both of the malls as well. And that's what you call the teleconnections there. Although it seems like the CFS shows to have a weaker AO, which I think it'll weaken throughout the spring here. I mean, it's been very strongly negative AO throughout most of the winter here. So yeah, that's stuff we gotta pay attention to. And teleconnections are extremely difficult well, basically they're nearly impossible to predict very far out. I mean, it's impossible to predict into April and May. But March, it's not as difficult, but I mean, it's still very difficult here as well. I mean, even predicting like 2 weeks out or whatever for the teleconnections, it is still extremely difficult. So, and that's what kind of killed the forecast last season. The AO and the NAO really kicked it into gear. Basically, the polar vortex decided to come and visit to the United States last severe weather season, and really brought into record low tornado counts across the several points last season. It was we had a very active March and April across the deep south, but then as soon as that polar vortex come in across the central and eastern United States, there was no severe weather that happened in May, which May is typically your most active month for severe weather, which it did not happen last season. So it turned out to be a below average overall, a below average season, just by tornado count on average here for the entire United States. So let's just take a look at some of these teleconnections here. And we'll start off with the AO here, with the GFS here. And as we go down here, you can see here it starts to go a little bit more neutral here. So you may have some bridging at times, maybe some troughing around. I mean, overall, it's just really a neutral AO, basically. And those things could be hard to predict overall. I mean, it's much better, it's much easier to predict a very negative AO or very positive AO. But when it's neutral, that's going to be a little bit difficult to predict to see what could happen here. This just means you don't really have much of any ridging or troughing across those regions there. The ensemble guidance shows of it a little bit of a different story here. It actually shows that heaven is actually going into a positive phase here, which could lead to some troughing across the north there. So it'll keep some of that cold air up around the polar vortex, the Arctic Circle. It'll keep some of that cold air up there. So it doesn't really lead to any cold air into the United States overall if that occurs there. But also, it's also not that strong either. I mean, some models do have it show it decently strong or at least moderate. But overall, we're probably looking at maybe a little bit of a positive AO to a neutral AO, at least for the first couple days of severe weather season here. And that could lead to some, not really a whole lot of issues for severe weather. And if we take a look into the NAO with this one here, it's also shown to be neutral here. And this is about the ensembles here. It looks to be slightly positive there, which could lead to some troughing across the NAO region, which is right around Greenland. But then again, I looks to be staying really around neutral overall. And the GFS pretty much shows that too. So basically, got a neutral AO and NAO. The PNA looks like it could go down negative, which could lead to some troughing across the northwestern United States. And that's kind of all we kind of know at this point here with the tail connections. And it seems like it's going to be a similar way, but it looks like it may rebound back to neutral. But keep in mind, this is only the first couple of days of severe weather season. And teleconnections are extremely difficult to forecast as well. So let's go back to the modeling here, and this is the Cfs model. Now, this is the precipitation anomalies. You can see you're pretty much dry across the deep south, even across the plain states as well. Eventually get into uh, the Southern Rockies, the southern, really just generally most of the western United States could be experiencing some dry weather. The only areas that's experiencing, well, really the only area experiencing possibly wetter than normal conditions looks to be the Pacific Northwest, which is where that negative PNA may kick in there as well, which could lead to some troughing and probably a little bit more stormy pattern up there as well. CFS models also is actually a little bit different here. Shows wetter than normal precipitation really across the Arctic region, the Ohio Valley, the Great Lakes, the Midwest, even across portions of the Northern Plains, and even kind of along the Pacific Northwest coast there as well. It's also dry across really most of the Rockies, even including the west coast as well of California. Even along the east coast here and eventually down across the deep south is even going to be dry as well, which that would be due to some southeast ridging there as well. But if it's going to be staying pretty much dry for the Rockies here, this could potentially lead to some capping across these regions here if we're going to have any severe weather type setups. And what's indicated here looks like we'll have warm and dry air, which some of this will get pulled in eventually into the plains here, and even sometimes into the Arctic region. It could create some capping here as well, which can prevent thunderstorms from developing. And I think the CFS model is probably overdoing the precipitation just a little bit for eastern Oklahoma. Well, generally speaking, eastern Kansas, in western Missouri, and I think portions of Arkansas, Oklahoma, Texas. I think it's okay, but I think western Missouri and eastern Kansas, I think that's a little bit overdone. I think it's going to be a little bit more neutral to maybe possibly a little bit drier up there where you could get some of this dry warm air into the mid-levels to create some capping across those regions there as well. Meanwhile, down here in the Arctic region, you kind of got some Gulf moisture to work with, which could be a little bit of battle between the warm and dry air mid-levels and also the uh, the moist levels as well, the moisture in the mid-levels as well. So there's probably going to be a little bit of a battle across those regions as well. Let's look at two temperatures here, and the Kansas fault does show some ridging across the, really generally speaking, the Central and Southern Rockies over into California, even into southeastern Oregon, and even across the Northern Plains, which I think it's overdoing the Northern Plains just a little bit here. It also doesn't show that much of southeast ridging as well. Really doesn't really show that, but models do indicate some southeast ridging really across the southeast, at least for March, which I'll probably be releasing my March forecast probably about a week from now. We're going to see about that. It's probably going to change a little bit more, but this is just the Kansas Models prediction. What's the Kansas Model? I mean, generally speaking, these models don't do a good job uh, predicting even for a couple months out. They don't really do a good job. And here's the CFS model, and in my opinion, this is likely to be overdone with the warmth, although it does show some below average temperatures across the northwestern United States. And meanwhile, generally two-thirds of the United States warmer than average, that's likely to be overdone. And like I said, it's going to be overdoing that southeast ridge, and I think there's probably going to be some ridging trying to build somewhere in the desert southwest as well, where you have that warm, dry air really start to build up across the desert southwest. However, it has been improving for the last couple weeks in February. It's been a very active pattern across these regions here, so the drought has been improving, but I don't think it's really going to prove enough to really make a difference for severe weather across the several points, which we'll take a look to the drought monitor in just a moment. Now, this is MSLP, and this is cutting your average for the 3 months here. So really the oranges, even the reds out here, that's where they kind of indicate some ridging, but when you get to these blue colors, this is where it indicates some of your low pressure systems could be at. And indication by the Kansas model, looks like we could have some low pressure systems, maybe some Colorado lows, which that's something we have not seen in a long time. Let me actually bring out the appropriate color here for a low pressure. So you could see potentially some Colorado loads indicated by the Kansas model, but you still have warm and dry air going on across the desert southwest, which is really going to prevent thunderstorms to develop across those regions there. If it was wetter than normal across the desert southwest, then you could possibly see more active severe weather across the several plains there as well. And you also do have some potentially some low pressure systems possibly up to the northern United States. It's even got it a little bit greater up into Canada there, which I think that's a little bit too far north. But you also do have some ridging across the southeast and even across the northwestern United States as well. That's just going to be depending on the EPO up there as well. Here's the CFS file, which I think this is probably a little bit more accurate of what I'm thinking for the MSLP. And you can see here, you got pretty good. Looks like low pressure systems could likely be around across southern Canada there. You could definitely have some stronger lows up there. So basically your average track for some of these lows here, some of the placement here, could be somewhere right in here. And with the southeast ridge in place, somewhere right in here could have some severe weather potential. When I kind of look at this here, there as well. And if I kind of match it up with the precipitation anomalies, if I kind of compare the two, you can see here, it actually kind of fits it pretty well with that some of that above average precipitation. Even across the upper Midwest, the Great Lakes, the Northern Plains as well also match up pretty well as well. Which I think the CFS model is probably a little bit more accurate with the MSLP here as well. Let's take a look into the Jamstack model here, which this has recently been updated here. A lot of this stuff has, well, exception for the Cfs model, but this is what the model thinks of the temperature anomalies here. And you can see here, it does show some strong ridging. I should probably zoom this in here so you guys can see this a little bit better. So for the United States here, you can see here in the reds that just indication of above average temperatures here. And you can see there, it indicates some bridging across the south central United States as well, which really brings down that severe weather potential across the severed plains. And also does show some ridging expanding all the way out into the east, southeastern United States as well. You also notice some troughing across the northwest here. Probably later on, maybe likely into May here, some severe weather chances may be further north than probably a little closer to average. It may be further north a little bit more early than average. Typically in June here, so your most active severe weather really expands into the Midwest and the Central Plains and eventually into the Northern Plains. And it looks like, I'll say possibly into May, there could be some severe weather issues across the Midwest, Northern Plains as well there. And let's take a look to the precipitation anomalies. And as you can see here, it does show some drier weather across most of the plain states, including the southeast, and even across the desert southwest. But you also notice here some above average precipitation really across the Great Lakes, the Northeast, and the Ohio Valley. I think that's a little bit too far east for my taste. I think this will be a little bit further to the west. But you also notice some above average precipitation across the Northwest there as well. Let's actually take a look to those sea surface temperature anomalies. This is where it kind of gets me to the next topic here, and that's the ENSO. And this is what this ball here prediction is. Let me actually keep that off. And your ENSO is right in here. Let me actually draw this real quick to show you guys where it is. So your ENSO is basically right in here, roughly about right in there. It's where your ENSO is, and basically shows a neutral phase here into the spring. Now, right now we are currently in a La Nina. It seems like the models do expect this to become a neutral phase here. And from what people said on Twitter here, history does show that typically when we get setups with the ENSO where we start to transition from a La Nina to a neutral ENSO, usually that's where you can get some of your most active severe weather periods somewhere right in there. And it seems like, unfortunately, the perfect time made during the springtime, so that's a little bit concerning there as well. And this is what the La Nina looks right now, and it's definitely been much weaker than the last time I've looked to it, which has been a while now. And you can see here, we still have La Nina conditions. It seems to be a little bit more of a weak La Nina now than like it was probably back in December. It was more of a moderate La Nina. Now we're into a weak La Nina. It looks like we're starting to warm up in regions 1 plus 2 and I believe 3 as well. Looks like we're starting to warm up a little bit there as well. But if we look below the sea surface here, there's still some pretty cold sea surface temperatures, well below the surface. So that it's usually some of those will come up to the surface. So this La Nina may actually stick around maybe a little bit longer than what the models think, but this is definitely got something to watch here. And typically with La Ninas, they show very active severe weather, generally from the, especially in the Arctic region, which I've mentioned this on my last video here, talking about the spring. Typically with a La Nina here, usually severe weather is very active across areas that I've just circled in red, especially across the Arctic region. And it seems like the Arctic region is really the bullseye of where you get in La Nina. But since we're kind of going from La Nina to neutral phase, I think that's going to kind of wear off a little bit in the Arctic region. So probably early on it could be very active, but probably later on, especially when ridging really starts to build across the desert southwest and areas like that, even across the even for the southeast ridge, your severe weather chances probably will go down across the Arctic region there as well. So let's try to look back into some years here. We actually got this photo right here, and this is the top 5 analogs for the current analysis here. And this was a little bit ago now. Whoops, I accidentally lost it. There we go. Now, this was between January 19th to February 18th, so this is recent. And you can see here, these here are the similar analogs here, or the top 5 most similar analogs here as well. And as you can see here, yeah, we got a big problem here. 1974, 2011, 2008, 2009, and 1976. Now, for research here wise, if I'm correct, 2009 and 1976 were more average to slightly above average severe weather season. But when we look into 2008, 2011, 1974, that's no good. And I'll show you guys what happened in these years. Beginning with 1974, which is more likely going to be a useless analog because climate changes all the time, with global warming, whatever. The climate back then was different. So these analogs, 1974 and 1976, are not going to be that great. But I'll still show you guys what happened in 1974 anyway. So April 3rd for 4th, 1974, tornado outbreak. Now this is one of the super outbreaks that happened in National Forest Service history. There's only been 2 super outbreaks here, and this is one of those. And you can see here we had a lot of tornado activity, really from northern Alabama, northern Georgia, through central and eastern Tennessee, central Kentucky, and eventually getting into most of Indiana, east central Illinois, and eventually getting into portions of West Virginia, even into western Ohio as well. So yeah, that's a pretty active couple of days here now, the 3rd for the 4th here. So this was a 2-day event here, and I'm pretty sure April 3rd, these tornadoes over here, well, not that big, but these tornadoes right over here probably happened April 3rd, but April 4th was your big day here for severe weather. So yeah, that's what happened in 1974. If we go back here, we got 2011. Now, these analogs are more useful. 2011, 2008, 2009. These analogs are pretty useful. So, let's take a look to 2008. This is a more useful analog than 1974. What happened this year? We had the Super Tuesday outbreak. This has happened back in February 5th here. Which, good news here, so far this February, we haven't had a big tornado outbreak. Because we have a very active, this thing is a little bit weird for some reason. But anyways, for really most of February, we had a very active pattern where we've been getting back-to-back winter storms and ice storms really for the Southern Plains, portions of the South, getting to the Ohio Valley and Mid-Atlantic, eventually up into the Northeast. It's been a very active winter pattern for a couple of weeks. And we unfortunately did have some severe weather across the Southeast. We did have a couple significant tornadoes, unfortunately. But the good news is, really overall, we haven't had a huge severe weather outbreak so far in February. That may change late February. I've also really been indicating possibility of a severe weather setup late February to very early March, which we may talk about that in some other video if anything, changes or whatever. But this is what happened in February here, and you can see here about the tornado reports. Yeah, a lot of stuff has happened here. Arkansas, Tennessee, Kentucky were probably the hardest hit states from this outbreak here. I mean, Texas was impacted, Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, and West Virginia. These states were affected by this Super Tuesday outbreak here. And up here in Kentucky, we had a pretty good, nasty squall line of storms here, which brought in some QLCS tornadoes, which is really tornadoes along the squall line here that developed there as well. And yeah, pretty nasty day. Then you had some really big time tornadoes across Arkansas, Mississippi, and Tennessee as well, and even portions of Missouri as well. It has a big time tornadoes. Now, 2011 is another analog. What happened that year? The super outbreak of 2011. So in the analog wise, we have both analogs here, both super outbreaks. That's not good when you think about it here. And this is what happened in the super outbreak of 2011. These little dots here, stuff like that, these were tornadoes. And this was a couple day event, April 26th to the 28th here. So you had tornadoes back across east central Texas, a good chunk of Arkansas, northern Louisiana, and Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and Tennessee were the hardest hit states with this tornado super outbreak. And then you had tornadoes across the Carolinas, Virginia, Kentucky, up into Maryland, Pennsylvania, and up into New York State as well. Got tornadoes up there as well, and yeah, pretty nasty day, couple of days for sure. And these here were your storm reports, and this was only on April 27th here, and that's when the big date happened. And you can see here with all these tornado reports, there was 161 tornado reports and 304 wind reports as well. So pretty nasty day, and hopefully we don't have a repeat of any of this severe weather season. And analog wise, they show a pretty big warning here, and that's kind of concerning there as well. And a lot of people have said here on Twitter, history wise here, when you kind of go from La Nina to a neutral phase or slowly weakening La Nina, usually where you get some of your most severe weather. So if we take a look back into some of those analogs here, like 1974, right down here, you can see here how your La Nina was also weakening that year. 2008 was another analog. You can see here, basically the same thing. 2011 was also the same thing. And was here a couple other analogs. 1976 was another one. 1976, same way. And then 2009, also the same way. So that's not a good sign at all for the upcoming severe weather season. Hopefully this becomes a bust here because analog wise, looks like we could be in big trouble. Now, for the Southern Plains here, this is where the drought really starts to come into play. And this can kill some of your severe weather potential. Now, analog-wise, they did show some pretty active tornado activity across the Southern Plains on pretty much all of those analogs. But where we have this drought in place here, which these here were one of the reasons why we didn't really see much of any severe weather across the Southern Plains is because of this drought. And this is more of a long-term drought here. And the Climate Prediction Center, their latest forecast, they're expected for this drought to expand more into the plains here, which for storm chasers, that want tornadoes or whatever, this is not good news for them. But people, they live in the plains or whatever, this is good news here. You guys may be spared for this severe weather season. However, since then, if I'm correct here, our drought out here has been improving. Especially with the active power that we had earlier this month here in February, we have a few systems that have gone by across these areas where they had quite a bit of drought here, and it seems like brought down the drought a little bit. But we still have a lot of drought out here. And when we still have a lot of drought out here, you're not going to see much of any severe weather activity across, generally speaking, the central southern plains here. And that could lead to a below average severe weather season across the plains. However, if we move into the Ohio Valley, the Deep South, in the Midwest, and even to the Great Lakes, the drought out here does not affect these areas in here. What affects these regions here is the Gulf of Mexico here. And if we kind of go back to what it looks like right now, where we have that very active pattern, it's pretty cool, kind of along the east, kind of like along the coastline. However, we do have some warmer waters there, so it's a little bit more average to slightly above average waters, which that means here there's going to be a good amount of moisture in place here for some of these systems to take up and kind of bring it up into some of these regions as well, which is something we really got to watch for there as well. So that's not a good sign for the Ohio Valley, Midwest, and Deep South as well, where the Gulf of Mexico is a little bit warm. Not as warm as last severe weather season, but it's still a little bit warm here, and which can be supportive for some severe weather across the beach regions here as well. Some of them almost forgot to mention here. Going back to the MSLP here, if I could find it. Here we go. Here, this is where I think there's gonna be a pretty common setup here. I feel like we could have. Now, this is just, take this as a grain of salt here, but this is where I think we're going to have some common setups. I think we can have some decently strong lows somewhere around the upper Midwest. You kind of have a warm front right up here, which kind of matches up well with the MSLP right here. Then you kind of have your cold front right here, slash stationary front, somewhere right in here. And some of these lows that could develop down here, somewhere down here, some of these lows could develop here. And what that could do here, it could ride up along that front there and can bring some more moisture across some of these regions here, and also can bring up some of those instability values as well, which is something I'm really paying attention to here, especially when I have an MSLP like this where it's a little bit below average here across those regions there, where more low pressure systems could be a little bit more common across those regions there with their warm front here. They could bring a little bit more warm moist air a little bit further north. And where you kind of near that triple point, that's where you really have to pay attention for the chance for severe weather, which would be a little bit more Pacific. It may have to be somewhere right in there. And kind of going back here, again with the drought monitor, the Gulf of Mexico is what matters here for really for the moisture across the Ohio Valley, Deep South, and Mid-Atlantic as well. And again, the drought out here does not affect these areas out here as well. So what's the Climate Prediction Center thinking of right now? Well, let's kind of take a look to this here. They do indicate some ridging across the desert southwest, even including the Severed Plains. Even it shows some ridging across the southeast here. Also a little bit trophy across the northwest as well, which could be favorable for some severe weather. Maybe across up here a little bit more into May. Severe weather may be a little bit more common out up there than normal. But probably early on, some of your most severe weather could be somewhere right in there as well. And if we look into their precipitation anomalies, you can see here with above average precipitation, generally speaking, the Ohio Valley, Great Lakes, and Midwest, back down into portions of the Tennessee Valley as well, which they do indicate possibility for some severe weather, really across the Midwest, Ohio Valley, maybe back down as far south as Tennessee Valley, and probably the Great Lakes there as well. So let's now get into my forecast here for spring. So this is the temperature forecast here. And for what I'm thinking here, I think there will be some southeast ridging across the southeast United States there as well, and even some ridging. And the ridging looks like it could really start to build up, especially kind of around in April and May timeframe. We should start to see some ridging start to build up across the western United States there as well. And I think we can also see the chance for some slight below average temperatures across the northwest and also into the northern plains. And in between here, you see mid-cycle chances. There are probably times where you can see some below average temperatures or above average temperatures. Or overall, you could say that's going to be average here. So that's the temperatures there. You could pause the video and pinpoint where your location is. I'll zoom in a little bit here. As well, you could kind of pinpoint your location here as well. Let's take a look to the precipitation forecast here. And I think it's going to be a little bit above average across the northwest. I think you guys, especially early on, I think you guys could get a decent amount of systems come on shore here. And I think they're not going to be a whole lot of moisture to work with as they kind of get into the Rocky Mountains. But I think when eventually when these lows here really start to build up, especially across when they get into the upper Midwest, they can really start to pick up some moisture as well. Especially when you have sometimes some of these lows here where the model's been indicating with that MSLP here, you may have a stationary front that kind of stays right here. In low pressure systems can go up along the stationary front and bring in some more moisture a little bit further north, which could lead to some above average precipitation up across the Ohio Valley, the Midwest, back down to the Arlington region into the Great Lakes as well. You also notice for the chance for some slight below average precipitation, where we have the drought issues. I think that's likely going to continue, especially when ridging is going to start building up into really April into May. And we really have that southeast ridge going on. I think it's going to be a little bit drier than normal across the deep south. Well, really kind of along the Gulf Coast, and also as well as kind of along the East Coast. There as well, can likely see some slightly below average precipitation there as well. And there will probably be times where you can get maybe some severe weather subs there as well, depending on how weak the southeast ridge could be there as well. Here's the severe weather forecast here, which I'm sure this is what everybody's been waiting for here. So where we have that dry air in place here, which I'm going to see if it improves here over time. If it improves, I may downgrade this to maybe about average, but we're going to see about that. But anyways, as we kind of look into this here, I do expect slightly below average severe weather again for western Texas, western Oklahoma, western Kansas, into southwestern Nebraska, and also for eastern New Mexico, western Colorado. Eventually get into southeastern Wyoming where we have drier air in place here, which is going to create some capping across some of those regions there as well. And this could possibly expand a little bit eastward here, depending on how strong the drought could be. The stronger it is, I mean, the stronger the cap is going to be, and also could expand a little bit further east there as well, which I don't think it's going to get a whole lot stronger, but we'll see about that. And then take a look into the Ohio Valley, Midwest, Tennessee Valley, back down to the Arlington region. This is areas we do expect for probably some of the most active severe weather. I think it's going to be a little bit further north than what the analogs are kind of showing. But definitely it shows a similar setup back in 1974, like I showed you guys on the super outbreak. But I don't think we won't have a repeat of any super outbreaks. I mean, this is just going to be a pretty tough forecast, like it really always is. And making severe weather season forecasts, these are usually very difficult. They're more difficult than making a temperature or a precipitation forecast. I mean, it really is. I'm also a little bit skeptical about the southeast. I was thinking about putting slightly below average severe weather across the southeast, but there may be times where you could get some severe weather events. Plus, your guys' tornado count or severe weather numbers are also pretty low. So if you get at least one severe weather event, you guys probably will go to average. So I'm going to put those areas average for now. But generally speaking, areas across the Great Lakes, Midwest, Ohio Valley, back down to the Arctic region, and portions of the South, and also Tennessee Valley, definitely gotta watch for the threat for some severe weather for the severe weather season. And also, kind of take this as a grain of salt. I mean, these forecasts are pretty hard to predict. I did all right on the last one, but overall, just take this as a grain of salt for now. Which I may make an update on this, but we'll see about that. The last thing I want to take a look into is the overall forecast. We'll go from west to east across the northwest. I think you guys will see some multiple systems kind of go on shore, especially early on. We could definitely see multiple systems go on shore here, bringing you guys some active weather across these regions there as well, especially across Washington and portions of Oregon. You guys will likely see some stormy conditions up there as well. Areas in white, which is across southern Oregon, southern Idaho, into western Wyoming and northern California. Just on your typical average spring there. That's what it really means there. A little bit self-explanatory. Then as we look into generally speaking, a good chunk of the southern half of the west here, expected to be mostly warm and dry. Although I think you guys can at least get a couple systems early on if the troughing is going to be a little bit stronger. But we should start to see ridge start to build up across a lot of these regions here, especially as we get into April and really May as well. I'm also going to get an agreement that we'll probably see some ridging build up across the west there as well. As we look into areas in the blue here, cold, and there'll probably be some winter storms early on, but as the spring goes on, it'll start to slowly warm, and that's just basically on average here. And maybe as we get into May here, you guys could possibly see maybe some severe weather activity up there as well. So we're going to have to watch for that there as well. So, but areas up here, I know a lot of these areas here haven't seen a good snow in a little bit. I mean, for most of February here, there's actually no snowpack up there. That's the time I'm making this video here. At least some areas don't have snowpack. And I think if we're going to get some winter storms early on, I think the troughing will probably be a little bit stronger across the beach reaches here, which could really enhance some severe weather potential just to the southeast of that. So we've got to watch for that closely. Then areas in the light green, that's where you probably do expect just generally just wet conditions here with some of these systems here. You guys could get some awful on rain, probably some thunderstorms, maybe some severe weather could get mixed in as well across these regions here, but we're going to see about that. Areas in yellow here, I think it's just generally going to be dry, especially even though you may have a system nearby. But with this dry, warm air across these regions here, it's going to create a cap across some of these regions here. Going to keep you guys probably mostly dry as well. But I think you guys could possibly still see some swings with weather. It could be warmer times, could be a little bit cooler at times as well. So that'll be an area to watch here. And that's probably do have some absurdities there as well. This drought out here is really going to determine your severe weather threat across the plains there as well. Then areas with white, we got more areas that could probably generally be average here, which includes most of the northeast, portions of the mid-Atlantic, back down into central Texas, and even including southern Oklahoma, northwestern Arkansas, and into central Missouri as well. Areas of the red, these are areas that could expect to see, or actually would expect to see, some severe weather activity as well. I think severe weather is going to be becoming a little bit more common this winter. Spring. And something I almost forgot to note here. The pattern that we've been seeing this winter here has been extremely similar to what happened back in 2011, which is a big concern there, especially with the cold and snowy pattern across Texas. That happened back in 2011 there as well. Even down here in Kentucky, for example, back at Christmas here, this was the snow snowiest Christmas here since 2010, Christmas 2010, which, what happened a year after that, you had the severe weather season of 2011. So, unfortunately, this year has been extremely similar to what happened back in 2010. Hopefully, we don't have a repeat of 2011 because I'm pretty sure that's one of the most active severe weather seasons on record, which was basically for nearly everybody as well. So, generally speaking, for anybody that lives really anywhere in the red zone, even some areas outside of this here as well, maybe for most of the Great Lakes, maybe a little bit further west as well, maybe a little bit further east or south. Just pay attention for the severe weather for the spring here. And hopefully, this becomes a bust here because this could be a pretty bad season here if the analogs are going to be correct with this here as well. And also, your warm and dry region does expand across the Gulf Coast states, even up along the East Coast, which I think I've said that already, but I'll just say it again there as well. And that's just pretty self-explanatory there as well. Yeah, I'm not sure if this is going to be my final forecast. I'll probably let you guys know on Twitter if this is going to be my final forecast or not. And if you guys do want to follow me on Twitter, the link will be in the description down below. You guys can follow me there. But anyways, guys, this is all for you guys today. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys like this video, hit that like button. If you really like my channel, hit that subscribe button. Hit the bell notifications so you never miss an upload. If you guys have questions about this, you can put a comment section down below. I'll answer you guys' questions. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.